of the sadder parts of that poem, sobering moments. Like one of the lines that hit me is when you said, wait for the pain to end. I thought that was really powerful.
Yes.
That's complex, man. That's complex.
It's crazy that same thing stood out to me as well.
Oh wow.
that verse stood out to me. You said that. Well, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because a lot of people who hear this version of the poem actually think that in this hell I scream and yet nobody will hear me is like one of the most powerful lines of that poem altogether. And I was like, okay, I've reread it again and again and again. I've done it on lives before, and it actually is powerful in itself.
Poetry is really like that, man. It can be really transformative. And I think about the question that I asked before you read that piece, and hearing how you sort of journeyed through the process of inspiring yourself, believing in yourself. So when I asked you the question of how would you motivate, or what would you say to someone who's lacking belief, you were speaking from a place of experience.
Yes.
I could tell from that piece as well. Dope, man. Thank you again for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, Tasheem, man, do you have a piece that you could share with us right now?
Of course I do.
All right.
Well, with most of my poetry theme is revolutionary music.
Okay.
When you hear my poetry, pretty much it's about revolution. A lot of people misconstrue and misinterpret what revolution is. For me, revolutionary music is taking the sound, the new sound, replacing it with the old, and formulating and put together a revolution, pretty much. So, as I said earlier, it's about conscious provoking.
Yes.
So I'm gonna do this piece here. Start with a chant. Revolutionary music, revolutionary music, revolutionary music, revolutionary music. Rising from the grave amazingly comes the day walker. Toting coffin text quoting the 42 confessions of the coming forth by day and night. In my right is my rod and my staff, because they protect me. As foretold by Dada Bookman and Tucson Overture, we've been lured into a spiritual warfare without any ammo. Just because you see me by myself doesn't mean I came here alone. My tone resonates through the twilight zone. My dome's ability is telepathy. My home is osmosis. Who's Moses? We don't resonate there. Beware of what you hear. The air clears hi-hats and snare drums as Morse code has told. There's subliminal messages in the graffiti on the wall. We premeditated it all. El Amaru, your horo. We now celebrate and dance to the revolution. Revolutionary music, revolutionary music.
Yes.
Wow.
Thank you, Tasheem.
Thank you.
I can hear the hip hop influence, your hip hop influence in your background in that poem. Your reference to this dance.
You hear it pretty much in most of my poetry.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely heard like old school Nas, Jay-Z, like based on how you were starting off. I was like, okay, this flows like something that you would pull off Illmatic or Reasonable Doubt or something like that, just based on the flow of the entire piece. And I love that personally.
Wow. You gave me Illmatic. Wow. Thank you, bro.
You're more than welcome. And Reasonable Doubt on top of that.
Oh, yes. You gave me and Reasonable Doubt. Oh, thank you, bro. That's definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Awesome piece. How did you know when that piece was done? Is it done?
I'll be honest with you, man. I never know when my poetry is done. Like, I'll have something sitting around and might want to add something to it any given time, man.
But how do you, when you do stop, how does that how do you approach that end point? Do you?
I have to make myself stop. I have to force myself to stop, man, because I'll keep going. I can't keep going. I mean, if you listen, like, I can take another poem and go into another piece, and it'll sound like the continuation of the
previous one.
Yeah, it just flows. Yeah,
it definitely does. It can, for sure, 100%.
Because I have books and books. You know, I haven't even gotten into taking my laptop and putting all my poems into a laptop. I still have notebooks.
Not the only one. I do too.
That's like the best way to do it.
I don't know what it is. I can't sit down and type my poems into I have to write. I'm old school, man. I have to do I have pads and pads beyond pads sitting here, man, in my room, man.
I tend to switch in between, like it depends, I guess. If I'm outside, because I do that sometimes, I like to write outside. It'll be pen and paper. If I'm inside, maybe not as much. And the other thing too, I don't know if it might be just a phase of my poetic journey in my life, but right now I have like these bursts of poetic inspiration. And then I'll write like a few stanzas. It's not a full poem necessarily, but something just comes to me in a very like strong and passionate. It just rushes to me, and usually in those instances I want to get it out quickly, and I find myself I want to save it somewhere because I lose receipts. Sometimes I run out of receipts. I'll throw them out, and I just get like Evernote and I'll throw it in there. So I go in between different platforms.
Yes, it definitely happens, because there are times when I'm on the train and I just think of something. And it's like, okay, I could start a poem with that, or I could include that in a poem that I'll write. So I have to write it down, like physically write it down before I lose track of it, even if it's on my phone or on a laptop or if I'm traveling. But usually I always carry a notebook with me, notebook and pens on me all the time, because you never know when you have a line that's like, oh my God, I thought of that. Like, I have to write it down and put it somewhere. And most of the time it's like that for me when I'm on the train, I'm on the bus, even if I'm in the house just by myself. Like, you know what? I haven't had an inspiration in a while, and then into my head comes something profound. Like, I want to write a puzzle about a jigsaw puzzle. I want to write a poem about a jigsaw piece or something like that.
Because I was just going to ask, what tends to be the subject matter of what you write about?
When it comes to subject matter, it's usually mental health or like personal experience. Sometimes it's even outside, like what I see, like more visual
observations.
To me.
And Tasheem, I know you mentioned conscious, thought-provoking type work, but what in particular, if you could hone in on certain things that tend to be the subject of what you write about?
Spiritual essence. Everything is really revolving around spiritual essence and an awareness of our spiritual. Which, when I say our, it's not to be racist or, to be racist in any sense, but our people, us. As in that last poem, you heard me say a word, El Amaru. a lot of people may not be familiar with that term, El Amaru. Amaru is the actual